Very good. Mitchell Taylor for the participant Government of Canada, and with me is Jonas Spiegelman.
Good morning.
Good morning. I believe that I took 10 minutes yesterday afternoon and estimated an hour and a quarter, so I think I've got an hour and 5 minutes by my calculations. I'll start, if I may, with Exhibits 701 and 702, and probably for ease of reference, let's have one on the screen at a time. Thank you, Mr. Bissett. 701 is fine. Mr. Nelson, can you explain what is this? Actually, just for a moment, if you don't mind, bring up 702 beside it, if you could, Mr. Bissett. These are the two documents that were made exhibits at the end of yesterday. Mr. Nelson, you're familiar with these documents, aren't you?
Yes.
And in fact, you either prepared them or they were prepared under your direction.
They were prepared for me, yes.
Can you explain what they are and what's important about the information on them?
Okay, what this shows is this is information derived from our data or fishery enforcement data system that we track our time with. So this represents the entire region's efforts towards habitat enforcement, and it's a percentage of our overall patrol time. So for maybe to give an example, if you look at the year 2003, it's 24% of fishery officers' patrol time in the year 2003 was spent on habitat.
And that's the yellow triangle at the top of the black line, is it?
No, the green bar. The green bar is the percentage.
Okay.
I'll explain the two lines on here after a minute.
All right,
So,
that's fine. So we're looking at the bars at the moment.
we're looking at the green bars. Now, if you go to 2010, which is last year, you'll see that represents about 10% of fishery officers' patrol time or field time was spent on habitat. So the trend is down over that time period. And it coincides with around the year 2005 when EPMP came in. We were, maybe one other thing I'd like to point out, that in 2003, that 24%, if you were to convert that into how many fishery officers would it take to do that amount of time, that would equate to about 36 fishery officers.
Sorry, which bar is 36?
The green bar for the year 2003.
All right.
I can explain how that's derived if you wish, but if we just follow through, I can come back to that.
I'll leave it to my friends to ask that. I'll
Okay.
just accept you.
Okay, so taking in 2003, that was approximately 36 fishery officers' time. In other words, 36 fishery officers working continuously on their patrol activities would have produced the green bar for 2003. For 2010, I'll use the 2009 bar, which is slightly less than the 2010 bar. That would represent about 12 fishery officers.
Okay.
So
All right.
that gives you an idea of the change. And the change from 2005 to 2009-10 is about 24 fishery officers.
All right. Now, you've got some lines on here that you were going to explain?
Yes, the blue line, which goes across the top of the diagram, shows the number of occurrences by year. The yellow triangle representing the exact amount in that year. So, and if you go to the far right of the column, you'll see the numbers. So if you draw a line across, say for example, again the year 2003, you'll see that that is about 1,800 occurrences in the year 2003.
Okay. And about 800 for 2010.
That's correct.
And then you have the red line.
The red line is the amount of violations by year. And again, if you follow a line across from the right column, you'll see that in the year 2000 there were 273 violations is what it actually is. And in the year 2010 there were about 118 violations.
And can you explain what's meant by each of occurrence and violation?
Well, occurrence is something that's reported to us. It can come from the public, it can come from Habitat, it can come from our own officers. It's something that is brought to our attention that we then make a decision to respond to it based on our priorities. And if we do occurrence, we try to respond to as many occurrences as we can. We don't respond to them all, but those that we do, we make an assessment on them, and if they become violations, that's how they're tracked. So using the example again, in the year 2003, of the nearly 1,800 violations, of the 1,800 occurrences, about 300 were violations. So approximately 1 in 6 occurrences resulted in a violation.
Now, in the PPR, and I don't need to take you to it at the moment, but in the PPR at paragraph 33, it refers to there being about 6% of CMP's efforts put towards habitat nationally. So I take it then from what you've just shown us, the region here in Pacific has a higher percentage effort than the national average.
Yes, that's correct. And for the Fraser River, going back pre-2005, because it has a larger amount of habitat, staff maintain about a 50% of their time on habitat enforcement activity. The Lower Fraser was less than that. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but they are substantially higher than the national average in this region, throughout the region.
And is Exhibit 702, which is the right side of the screen, is that the data that underpins the graph that's on the left side of the screen, Exhibit 701?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I'll turn now, if I may, to...
maybe just one thing on that. There's a number on, or an acronym on there that says UCAT, and that is unlicensed close area time, just in case somebody's... It's not really related to the habitat, but it was put on there as a comparison, I take it.
Unlicensed closed area time.
Yeah, that's a patrol activity not related to habitat. That's a work element that fisher officers do in their patrols.
All right.
Yeah, so it's not really related to the habitat.
I'll turn now to Section 36, if I may, and I've got a couple of questions on that for members of the panel. I want to be sure that we're all clear who does what under Section 36. And it's said that the Department of Environment handles Section 36 matters, but there is a residual part within Section 36, I think, that's left with fisheries. I'll start with you, Ms. Bombardier, but can you explain exactly what it is under the arrangement that's now been in place for some decades, what precisely Environment handles under Section 36?
Environment Canada focuses really on industrial, municipal, or any other type of pollutant chemical discharges in marine or fresh waters that are fish-bearing.
All right. And just for the record, the relevant part of Section 36 is 36 sub 3, which says, in material respects, no person shall deposit or permit the deposit of a deleterious substance of any type in water frequented by fish, and so on. Mr. Steele or Mr. Nelson, is there nonetheless a residual aspect that fisheries still handles in terms of 36.3?
Yes, the portion of 36.3 that fisher officers handle is sediment-related activity or cases. It's often associated with the HADs, the harmful alteration situations that we come into, and so anything to do with sediment release into fish-bearing waters is a DFO responsibility. All of the other chemicals and sort of things are Environment Canada.
All right, thank you. Now, Ms. Bombardier, am I correct that Environment, and you've alluded to some of this, I think, administers and deals with a number of other statutes to do with chemical-based spills or leaks or whatever, other than 36.3 of the Fisheries Act?
Yes, that's correct. Environment Canada is responsible for the administration and enforcement of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, which is the primary statute of the federal government for toxic substances, for regulating toxic substances. So there are about 50 or so regulations that have been that came into force under that specific legislation. We also have the wildlife legislations that are enforced by our Wildlife Enforcement Directorate in Enforcement Branch. Those deal with migratory birds, species at risk, and there are some like oil spills that affect migratory birds and species at risk would be regulated as well under those wildlife legislations.
And is the work that you do under these other statutes and regulations involve, at least in part, chemical spills or pollutants and so forth?
Yes, we have, for instance, the disposal at sea regulations that regulate any disposal of chemicals, toxic substances at sea. So there's a permitting program in place under SEPA. So regulators have to have a permit before they dispose of those substances. We have pulp and paper, for instance, pulp and paper regulations that deal with dioxins and furans, wood chip, defoaming substances. So there's a monitoring system in place under those regulations, and companies have to report on a regular basis to Environment Canada. So yes, sectors covered by the Fisheries Act are also covered under SEPA.
Now, am I correct that over the years and decades, Environment Canada has built up considerable expertise in chemical-based pollutants and spills?
Yes, I can speak for enforcement for sure. We do have training in terms of taking samples, so our officers are properly trained to enforce 36.3 and release type of incidents. We have a number of labs across the country that perform those analysis for us, toxicity testing, chemical analysis, whether it's air, soil, water. So we have that expertise as well, and we have scientific knowledge in our programs, the programs of Environment Canada who administer those regulations. We have scientists, engineers in those programs that provide us the scientific advice as required under our enforcement cases.
Is one of those labs here in Vancouver?
Yes, we have the Pacific Environmental Science Centre, what we call the PESC, is the main lab in BC that performs those analysis for us.
And would it also do the analysis for the Yukon gathering of evidence as well?
I believe so, yeah.
Is it the case that even apart from Section 36.3, your department, Environment, would still need to have the expertise you've just spoken of and do the work that you've just spoken of?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Now, Mr. Steele, I want to turn to you, if I may, for a few moments. Tab 1 of Canada's Book of Exhibits. This is a briefing note, as I understand it, seeking approval of the revised Habitat or National Habitat Compliance Protocol, which has now been marked as Exhibit 657. That is to say, the revised National Protocol is Exhibit 657. And now I have put before you, and it's up on the screen, if you, Mr. Bissett, could turn to the next page, please. Thank you. This is a briefing note. You're familiar with this, are you?
Yes, I am.
Just dealing with the summary for the moment. Do the fourth and fifth bullets, which are halfway down the page, and beginning the intent, and the other one is the integration, do they accurately set out the intent of the 207 protocol and then the 2010 revision?
Yes, they do.
It seems to set out that there's three purposes, and I'll sum it up and then let you comment on this. Firstly, to integrate habitat compliance activities. Secondly, to be clear as to roles and responsibilities between Habitat and CMP. And thirdly, to focus on high-risk habitat occurrences. Is that the nub of what the revised protocol is about?
Yes, I would say that's accurate.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that clearly describes it. It was the main focus was to accurately describe roles and responsibilities so that especially field staff would be clear as to how they relate to each other and what their respective roles would be.
All right. Now, under the current organizational structure of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as I understand it, both Habitat from the operational side of Habitat and CMP are under the same ADM, are they?
That's correct, yes.
And when did that organizational arrangement come about, roughly?
It would be last year, 2010.
Okay.
Exact dates, I'm not sure.
Now, Mr. Nelson, in the region, you said you report to Sue Farlinger,
Yes.
and there is a director, a regional director of Habitat, who also reports to her as well. Is that right?
Yes,
And that's currently Greg Savard, is it?
that's correct.
And the two of you and other regional directors sit on the Regional Management Committee, do you?
Yes.
And that meets regularly and deals with various things as they come up for the region?
Yes.
Now, if you turn to the next page, Mr. Steele, it is the background section, and you're familiar with the contents of this briefing note, I think, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Do bullets 1 and 2 accurately set out the genesis and the purpose of the habitat compliance modernization, that being the sixth element of EPMP? Or is there anything that you think is important to add to what's in the first two bullets there?
Well, maybe just to clarify, the second sentence of the first bullet refers to 35 fishery officer positions being eliminated. That was not in the Pacific region. That would have been in the Central and Arctic region.
All right.
But other than that, I think that's just a clarification point. Other than that, I would say it's accurate, yes.
All right, thank you. And this is setting out that there's a strategic, integrated, risk-based approach to the habitat compliance activities in bullets 1 and 2. If you move to bullets 3 and 4, do they set out the origin and purpose of the 207 protocol?
Yes, they do.
Now, from bullet 5, it appears that there was an internal audit or evaluation done of CMP, and they made certain recommendations, did they? And that was in 208?
That's correct, yes.
And more specifically, they recommended that there be a distinction made between administrative and law enforcement functions. You'll see it there. And then it seems to have two reasons set out for why that distinction was to be made. One, to facilitate a common collaborative approach, and secondly, to mitigate potential health and safety risks to habitat officials. And we heard about some of that yesterday. But are those the two reasons why there was to be a distinction made between administrative matters on the one hand and law enforcement on the other?
Yes, I think that's probably a direct quote from the report, the audit report at the time.
And then, as I understand it, and we've seen this report before, but in 2009, the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development prepared a report, and it says here that he or she recommended accelerating the work towards risk-based monitoring of projects. Is that what led to the 2010 revision? Or one of the main impetus that led to it?
Yes, I think that was one of the factors. The other was the fact that the original protocol was for a 2-year period, in effect for 2 years, and it was overdue actually by 2010 for review and revision.
All right. You'll see at the end of this briefing note on the 3rd page, which will come up on the screen, I think. Sorry, it's on the 5th page, my mistake. You'll see that there's some attachments to this briefing note, a fair number actually. The second one is the National Habitat Protocol, which is Exhibit 657. I just want to run through these attachments and see if you can identify them and put them in as exhibits. If you turn to, maybe the easiest thing to do at the moment, Mr. Bissett, would be to keep the left side of the screen with what you have, and then bring up, if you don't mind, tab 2 of Canada's binder. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Spiegelman correctly reminds me. Before we move on, may the briefing note we've been discussing be marked as an exhibit, please?
Exhibit 703.
Then if we go to tab 2, you've got it in paper form in front of you. I know Mr. Steele as well. Is the right side of the screen the document that's referred to at tab 1 of the briefing note attachment list?
Sorry, could you ask that question again?
Is the document, the chart-like document on the right side of the screen, the document that's being listed as tab 1 to the briefing note?
Yes, it is.
May the right side of the screen, being a summary of revised roles and responsibilities, be the next exhibit, please?
704.
And that's a quick compendium of the changes that were being made, is it, to the roles and responsibilities?
That's right, yes.
If we go to tab 4 of Canada's binder, this is a memo from Claire Dansereau, the Deputy Minister, to Regional Directors General. Is that the document that's referred to at tab 3 of the list of attachments to the briefing note?
Yes, it is.
And that's essentially saying that the deputy is saying that here is the revised protocol, regional directors, and please note and pay attention and pass it on to your staff. Is that what that is?
Yes, in addition to that, she's asking regions or regional directors general to prepare regional protocols that would accompany be consistent with and provide another level of detail and would be sort of companion documents to the national protocol. And
All right.
yes.
All right. May this memo from the Deputy Minister, which is dated January 17, 2011, the date being on the last page, be the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 705.
Then if we turn to the next tab in the book, there is a document there, but we provided last evening to everyone a revised document. The wrong document got in at tab 5, and Mr. Bissett has now kindly put the replacement document to what was at tab 5 before you. It's called National Habitat Compliance Protocol Communications Plan. Is that the document now on the right side of the screen that is what is referred to at tab 4 of the briefing note?
Yes, it is.
May that be the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 706.
Continuing on, and you can see we're almost done this part. At tab 6, there is a document implementation of the National Habitat Compliance Protocol. Is that the document referred to at tab 5 of the briefing note?
Yes, it is.
May that be the next exhibit, please?
707.
At the bottom of the first page, it says that there was some training to do with the revised national protocol to be delivered, amongst other places, in Kamloops, British Columbia in October 2010. Do you know, Mr. Nelson, was that training given?
I don't know. I don't remember exactly. It's here. I presume it was, but I don't recall.
All right, that's fine. If you turn to the next tab, and finally, and for this part, there is some speaking points for the minister, and is that the document that is being referred to at tab 6 of the briefing note, Mr. Steele?
Yes, it is.
May that be the next exhibit, please?
708.
Now, if we turn to the national protocol itself, the revised national protocol, and we're done with these documents that are on the screen, Mr. Bissett, which is Exhibit 657, and it's also at tab 3, I think, 3 of Canada's binder. You'll see from paragraph or section 3, which is on the next page, that regional operating protocols are contemplated. It's in the second paragraph under that section. And as I understand it, there is one for this region, that is Pacific region, that's dated in 2007.
That's correct.
And that, of course, would have been under the older national protocol. Now that there's a revised national protocol, will you and your colleagues, Mr. Nelson, be developing a revised or amended regional protocol?
Yes.
Is that underway now?
I've had initial discussions, but we haven't gone beyond that yet.
All right. Using the 207 as an example of what's done, am I correct that after the 2007 original national protocol was developed and passed out to the regions, including yourself, then developed a regional protocol, which is the one done in 2007?
Yes.
And we don't have it before us. I don't think we need it at this time, but that's been in existence for several years now, and people have been operating under it, have they?
Yes.
And in turn, underneath the regional protocol, were there area protocols?
Yes. In some areas, they were developed and completed in some areas. Others were operating under principles, but I think there were one or two that had not actually done.
Do you know whether BC Interior had one?
I believe they did.
And do you know about Lower Fraser?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What about the coast?
I think North Coast did. I'm not sure about South Coast.
All right. And these are, if you like, a cascading series of protocols where the national one is at the broadest level and regional in the middle, and then you get much more detail at the
Yes.
area to suit the particular area's circumstances.
Yes, but they still have to follow the principles of each one above them, yes.
All right. Now, in section 5, which is on page 3 of the protocol, it's on this page, just at the top of the page, though, top of 3, that is. There are some definitions, including a definition of lead. And under the protocol, I see that lead means the party accountable. That is, either Habitat's accountable or CMP's accountable. So I take it, Mr. Nelson, that accountable means just that, or sorry, lead means accountable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the lead is doing the work. Is that right?
That's how I would interpret it, yes.
All right. And you as well, Mr. Steele?
Yes, that's right.
And when it comes to inspectors' directions, as I understand it, and it's further down in the document here, but Habitat is the lead, but we've heard this yesterday, it's actually your group, Mr. Nelson, who's got the authority to issue inspector certificates.
Under the new protocol, yes.
Now, I won't go through all of this in the interest of time, but and I leave it with the commissioner, but you can see that over on pages 4 and 5, there's a detailed setting out of roles and responsibilities there, including under section 5.5, there's a section 5.53, where C&P is the lead in the issuance of inspectors' directions. And that Habitat Management shall support CMP in the development of the content of those inspectors' directions. Our protocols, such as the one we've been looking at, are they a common tool within Fisheries and Oceans to establish the respective roles and relationships between different branches of the department, Mr. Steele or Mr. Nelson?
We have several of them, one with Coast Guard, this with Habitat. They are common. Yeah.
You agree they're common, Mr. Steele?
Yes, I agree. In situations where you need to work closely with another program, it's a common tool that's used, yes.
And sometimes you have protocols with other departments or other governments too, don't you?
Yes, we do. Often they take the form of a more formal document, a memorandum of understanding, but basically serving the same purpose, yes.
Is protocol and memorandum of understanding, are those synonymous terms, or is there some term of art about each of them that makes one different from the other? Do you know?
Not sure I could comment on that. Remember, of understanding perhaps a bit more of a formalized process.
All right.
Requiring signatures at a higher level, that kind of thing. But basically, from my perspective, they serve more or less the same purpose. Yeah.
All right. And Ms. Bombardier, from environment standpoint, does your department use protocols and memorandums of understanding as you've heard Mr. Steele and Mr. Nelson describe?
Yes, in a situation where we need to clarify roles and responsibilities, we have, for instance, for enforcement, we have one with our emergencies program because we work very closely with them. And it's important for our staff to understand the roles and responsibilities of both parties and how they have to work together. So yes, it's common practice where appropriate and relevant.
All right, thank you. Now, I have a further document that I want to show to Mr. Steele and Mr. Nelson in particular, and it's the document that was sent last evening, Mr. Bishop. This is a document that we have not put in our binder. That's the right one? That we have not put in our binder, so it's a new document that was distributed last night. I haven't heard anyone taking any position about this, so unless someone takes a position, I'll proceed. Mr. Steele, you're familiar with this document, are you? Starting, I guess, with the point halfway down the first page where you're writing an email February 8, 2011. We can all, I think, overlook or ignore everything above that, which is simply some passing of this package back and forth amongst officials. But from your name downwards, February 8 to 11, you're familiar with this?
Yes, I am.
What is this?
This was an email that I sent to the regional C&P directors. And as well as you'll see a number of other names listed there. Those are basically administrative staff in the directors' offices.
Okay, and Mr. Nelson being one of them, I see.
Yes, that's right.
And
the purpose was to provide them with. At this point they had already received the revised protocol via the DM's. Memorandum to RDGs, but this was providing them with additional background materials, a presentation deck which basically summarized the implementation strategy, and as well as some questions and answers for staff, with the intention that these would be disseminated from their offices out to all staff.
All right. Mr. Nelson, you're one of the recipients, as I noted. Did you in turn pass this on to the CMP staff here in the region?
I passed it on to the chiefs that report to me,
Right.
yes, and received feedback from them on it, and said this is what we'll be operating under.
And did you have verbal briefings as well?
I have a weekly conference call with staff. I believe it was raised on one of those.
All right. Now, we've spoken of the regional protocol between CMP and Habitat. We don't actually have it here, although I'm convinced it exists somewhere. You have a fair recollection of it, though, I think, Mr. Nelson, do you?
Depending what questions you ask about it, I remember working on it and developing it, helping develop it, yes.
Okay, well, I think we'll just leave that there.
Yeah.
But in general terms, it is a protocol that is designed to operationalize at the regional level what
Yeah.
the national protocol was.
It's to help guide staff and to clarify what roles and responsibilities each of them have.
Right.
To maintain consistency of how we approach it throughout the region.
And in the revised regional protocol, would I be right that you'll be using the 207 regional protocol and the 2010 national revised protocol as your baseline to then develop a new one for here?
Yes.
And you will be expecting your area chiefs to, after that, develop their own area protocols, will you?
In initial discussions with the regional director of Habitat, we weren't sure, depending how our regional one is developed, whether we would have to further ask for area ones. We haven't determined that yet. We may or may not.
I want to turn to tab 14 of the Commission's exhibit binder, document entitled Conservation and Protection Program National Priorities 2010-11. You recognize that, do you, Mr. Steele?
Yes, I do.
And is that a document that's produced in roughly that kind of form annually?
Yes, it is.
If you, and as I understand it, this is in chart form a document that sets out the priorities of CMP and assigns essentially a 1, 2, 3 or ABC level of priority to each one. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
If you turn to page 3, and on, actually page 3, you'll see at the top habitat issues. And am I right then that the habitat issues are all covered in 5A, B, and C?
Yes, I believe they are.
And so the habitat priorities are either an A or B. One is A and 2 are B. And the A is responding to the Auditor General's report on habitat enforcement. Can you just elaborate briefly on what it is you're responding to when you identify that priority there?
Yes, I think there were two recommendations that we discussed briefly yesterday in relation to two recommendations that applied specifically to the CNP program. I don't have the exact wording here, but both of them related to the requirement for us to develop the protocol. There was also, I believe, a recommendation relating to improving the documentation on our record keeping, on our files and on our record keeping system, the DVS system, departmental violation system. So what we were trying to capture here in the priority table was the requirement to provide regular updates on, well, first of all, to obviously make progress on those recommendations, and then to provide regular updates as required on the progress being made.
All right, thank you. Could this document then, the Conservation and Protection Program National Priorities 2010-11, be the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 709.
And I'm reminded, thank you, Mr. Martland, that I didn't mark as an exhibit the document that we spoke of a few moments ago, which is the one that we sent last night, and it may come back up on the screen. And with that, yes, thank you. The email and attachments from Mr. Steele of February 8, 2011. May that be the next exhibit, please?
It's 710.
I wonder if I could just confirm so the record reflects it that that exhibit attaches to it. Mr. Taylor may know these better than I'm sure he does. Two different attachments, what seems to be a Q&A as well as this presentation that just flashed onto the screen with what looks to be a whale at the top.
That is correct. It's an email with two attachments, all as one exhibit. Now, I'd like to ask you, Ms. Bombardier, some questions about more on the work that Environment does. You've already spoken of environments focusing on chemical-based releases, and that Environment takes its role under Section 36 very seriously and has built up significant expertise. You've talked about in your evidence yesterday that the work effort on the part of Environment is in the range of 40 to 45% as it applies to Section 36. That is, roughly that amount of your time applies to 36. Now, in terms of response time, am I right that there are criteria that are used to guide environment officials in terms of whether they respond fast or not as fast to a particular incident report that comes in?
There are some factors to take into account in terms of priority for actions, whether we go on-site and perform an on-site inspection, or whether we need to get the further clarification or further information on the incident, which we call an off-site inspection. But in terms of priority for action, it all depends on what the priorities of the day are when we get the occurrence level of harm, so the severity of the incident level of harm to the environment, whether partners are involved, whether, well, first, is it under our jurisdiction? If it's not, then definitely we'll make sure that other parties who may have a role get the information. So we need to confirm first whether we have jurisdiction, whether we have enough information to suggest that there's a potential violation. We look at the degree of harm and other factors related to the incident, and those factors are taken into account to determine whether we look at the facts on off-site, so from the office, or whether we need to go and conduct an inspection on-site.
All right. And so if there's a report of a fish kill, does that generate, what level of response does that generate?
If there's a fish kill, definitely we will go on-site.
And what about where you have repeat incidents being reported?
Same thing.
Now, does Environment Canada have intelligence gathering officers?
Yes, we have about 14 or 15 intelligence officers and managers across the country. So each region, we have five regions, so each region has one manager, one intelligence officer, and we have staff as well in headquarters.
And without, did you say how many are here in Pacific Region?
There's one manager and one acting officer right now.
But without going into specifics and without going into intelligence confidential information, shortly stated, what do they do?
The HQ office is responsible for conducting what we call strategic intelligence, so gathering information on activities in a particular sector of interest, looking at trends, and providing kind of a risk analysis of where risk of non-compliance exists, a high risk of non-compliance, So that strategic intelligence helps in terms of planning our activities the following year or in the near future. At the regional level, the focus is more on tactical intelligence. So, for instance, an officer focusing on a particular sector needs to get information on the activity of that sector, the networks being involved to identify particular risks for that inspection to take place. So that is what we call tactical intelligence. It's focused on a specific activity as opposed to a larger sector.
All right, thank you. I want to ask you a question about Section 38.4 of the Fisheries Act, and you spoke of this the other day, but I want to be sure that it's clear here what this is about. Section 38.4 says in large part that where out of the normal course of events there occurs a deposit of a deleterious substance in water frequented by fish, or a serious and imminent danger thereof, and so on. You're familiar with this section, are you?
Yes, I am.
And can you explain what this is all about in terms of a administration of a statute standpoint and operationalizing it, and what does Environment do, or does Environment have a role here, and if so, what do they do?
Yes, Environment Canada has a role. We have published in Canada Gazette 1, I believe in 2009 or early 2010, what we call environmental occurrence notification regulations. So those are regulations that outline contact information in the regions for receiving reports of occurrences. We have, to implement those regulations, we have entered into agreements with some of the provinces. We have, I believe, a draft agreement with the province of BC, who receive notifications on behalf of Environment Canada and provide us the reports in a timely manner, so we get the information in time to determine whether we need to follow up. In terms of deposit out of normal course of events, our understanding of what this provision includes, it includes accidental releases. It includes releases that are covered by regulations that for industries that are subject to the regulations but exceed standards of those regulations. Automatically, there's a reporting requirement under 38.4 to report those releases. And also it includes continuous releases that are not covered, not subject to the pollution prevention regulations. So it covers all three, and there's a requirement to report those releases to Environment Canada.
All right, thank you. If we may turn to tab 8 of Canada's binder, please. This is a very colorful and elaborate chart. Do you recognize this, Ms. Bombardier?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain what this is?
It's basically a diagram that outlines the steps in identification of priorities for compliance at Environment Canada. So it is an integrated compliance promotion and enforcement effort. It starts around September, October every year. We send a call letter to the programs who administer the regulations under SEPA and the Fisheries Act, the pollution prevention regulations I'm talking about. And they provide us new information on the regulated sector, on training available to our enforcement officers, and that help in terms of identifying priorities for the following year. So it's a very comprehensive consultation process that takes place at the departmental level, and it identifies key priorities for the following year, and that guides the development of regional work plans, which are then integrated into a national enforcement and national compliance promotion work plan.
All right, thank you. And what you've just said is what's reflected in the boxes that are center vertically on the page and about 2/3 across. Is that right? That is developing regional work plans, approving them, and then integrating them into the national enforcement plan. That's what you were just speaking of a moment ago, is it?
Yes, that's correct.
I don't know if it has a bearing on the work that Environment does with Section 36, but in the upper left there are some acronyms. Can you say what is EED and what is CPAD?
EED is the Environmental Enforcement Directorate, and CPAD is the Compliance Promotion I believe A is for Activities Directorate.
All right, so those are 2 units within environment, are they?
It's a 2-unit, the EED, which I'm responsible for, reporting to Enforcement Branch, and the Compliance Promotion Directorate reports to the ADM of Environmental Stewardship Branch. So a different ADM.
All right. Do you have the policy and practice report before you? But containing it, I think, there.
And for the witness's benefit, it should be tab 4 of Commission Council's booklet of materials.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Martland. And I'll let you locate that binder, and then when you locate it, I'm interested in paragraph 61, Ms. Bombardier.
And in that lull, I wonder if the very colorful
Oh, yes, thank you.
diagram should be made an exhibit.
In my enthusiasm to meet the clock, I keep forgetting to put the exhibits in. May the chart headed proposed planning process to determine compliance for 2011-14 be marked as the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit 711.
Just on that, Ms. Bombardier, and what's been marked as exhibit 711, it says it's for 2011-2014. Is this an exercise you go through every year?
Yes, it's an exercise that we go through every year, but we look at the horizon of the discussion. The discussion looks at more than a year, but the priorities are identified for 1 year.
All right, so it's a rolling document, if you like, and next year you'll be doing one like this for 2012 to 15, will you?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you have exhibit, paragraph 61 of the of PPR number 8 before you?
Yes, I do.
It says there that over half the convictions under 36, this is at the bottom of that paragraph, over half the convictions under Section 36 have been the result of recommendations for charges by DFO. Now, I'm not asking you to speak to what DFO does, but with regard to that comment in Section 36, have you got a comment to make on that?
I think that has more to do with the situations that are involved. DFO, as we spoke earlier, is responsible for sediment type releases. So they have authority to take enforcement action on sediment releases under 36.3. Our enforcement activities under 36.3 focus more on pollutant type incidents. I don't have stats in front of me, but we have done a number of prosecutions under 36.3 for pollutant type incidents, and that, I think that statement seems to focus more on DFO activities, but Environment Canada has been quite active as well in this regard.
All right. That paragraph 61, could be read to suggest that prosecution is about the only tool or acceptable means available to your department, or DFO for that matter, when faced with non-compliance. Are there other tools, and what are they?
Yes, there are a number of tools that are they're all outlined in our compliance and enforcement policy, a document of 2001. It's, as I was explaining yesterday, it's an escalating approach that we apply for the enforcement of Section 36.3 and the pollution prevention regulations, starting with warning letters, which are the less stringent measures. It's more for administrative type of violation. We also have inspectors' directions that are issued by our fisheries inspectors to prevent or stop releases, and require that actions be taken to mitigate those releases. So those are also very effective. We have ministerial orders, ministerial requests for information, for instance, under Section 37. We've used that occasionally. And, of course, the prosecutions. But the prosecution is the last resort. And it's only for specific circumstances that are also outlined in the compliance and enforcement policy. For instance, when there's obstruction or lack of collaboration from the regulatee.
The 2001 document that Ms. Bombardier referred to as Exhibit 693, Mr. Commissioner. Now, I know that Mr. Nelson and Mr. Steele will have some comment on remedies and sanctions that are available, and I'll come back to that and discuss it with them before we close. In terms of paragraph 14 of the PPR, that is a paragraph that quotes from some writing by Otto Langer. Do you have a comment on whether either or both of Environment and DFO are responsible for water quality? And in particular, whether the division between your two departments and responsibility for aspects of Section 36 would have anything to do with water quality?
I think Section 36 is there to protect fish and fish habitat from deleterious substances, so there's definitely a link with water quality there.
All right. The purpose, though, of your work is aimed at fish habitat, is it? And water quality is, if you like, flowing out of that, no pun, but flowing out of that and incidental to that.
It's protection of fish and fish habitat, yes.
All right. Now, Mr. Nelson, can I ask you what sources of information Fisheries has at its disposal in terms of gathering information or identified occurrences that are harmful to fish habitat?
Well, we have our data violation system. I'm sorry, I'm missing the question. Exactly referring to, like, where do we get our information from that lead us to evidence or to investigations?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, lead you to an occurrence that may in turn
yeah.
lead to an investigation.
Yes, you get them from the public. We have a 24-hour line that the public can report an incident to. We get them from our own officers going out on patrol. We get them from habitat staff reporting occurrences to us. Anybody in any government agency, sometimes Environment Canada, Conservation Officer Service, it can come from any number of sources. Does
DFO have intelligence officers?
We with funding from the PICFI program, we initiated an intelligence and investigation unit, and we have, for just over a year, had an intelligence analyst. And in each of our areas in the region, we have designated an area intelligence officer. So it's a fishery officer who gathers the intelligence for that geographic area and feeds into the system. Now, as was described by Ms. Bombardier, they're more advanced, I think, than us on their intelligence system. But ours is moving along, and it really helps. Prior to using this, you go investigate based on your instincts and your gut feelings. And I think intelligence-led is quantifying and using all the information that you have available at hands to direct those activities. It often leads to the same place, but it's more disciplined and more accountable.
Ms. Bombardier, you may have mentioned this, but just to be clear, in case you didn't, am I correct that Environment has got a telephone line that is widely advertised for the public to phone to if they spot something that they see as harmful to habitat?
As indicated earlier, there's a contact information in the notification regulations that provides basically all the contact information where occurrences are to be reported, and that's outlined in the regulation, and we also on our website. It differs from one province to another, of course.
All right. Now, in the Commission's binder, at tabs 18 and 19, there are two documents, each of which is entitled National Enforcement Plan, but they're for different years. Tab 18 is 208-209, and 210, 211 is the next one. Do you recognize both of these documents, Ms. Bombardier?
Yes, I do.
And are they exactly what they're titled, National Enforcement Plan?
Yes, they're a national enforcement plan for the Environmental Enforcement Directorate as opposed to wildlife.
All right, and may those be the next two exhibits, please. We'll have the National Enforcement Plan of 20809 as the next exhibit.
It may only be one because I believe the one to the right, 2010-2011, is Exhibit 697.
Thank you.
Exactly.
So we'll put 208 in as the next exhibit.
That's at tab 18, correct?
Yes.
The 712.
698, did you say, Mr. Martland?
697.
At Commission's tab 15, and this is a question of you, Mr. Nelson, there is a document entitled CMP Priority Statement for 2010-11, National and Pacific Region. This is Exhibit 695 now. And there's been some evidence about this document before. Is this a routine operational planning document that's done annually?
Yes, it is.
And at page 5 of that document, it sets out I think it sets out. Oh, yes, 1/3 down the page, operational commitments. Can you comment on the importance of setting out area level operational plans? I'm not sure if that's the section of this this document that deals with that. Are you familiar with area level operational plans?
I think you're referring to the lower section on habitat management, is that correct?
Probably.
Yeah, yeah. This document was prepared prior to the new habitat protocol. So it comments in here about the area protocols which you'd asked about earlier, and it does confirm that we did have one in North Coast, and South Coast and Lower Fraser were in draft form. So and I believe BC Interior had one as well. So this refers to those area protocols for prior to the current national protocol. And as I stated, I had initial discussions with my counterpart of Habitat, and we may or may not have area protocols like this, depending how the regional one goes.
All right. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to move along. Mr. Steele, in the PPR at paragraph 68, there's a reference to fishery officer positions and the comings and goings. 68. Yes. Do you have a comment on what's written there, Mr. Steele?
Yes, I do. It's in relation to the sentence in parentheses or in brackets, which states 12 of the 24 fishery positions in the version of, yes, I think that's meant to say fishery officer positions, were eventually returned to CNP. This is referring to the EPMP process and the reductions that were proposed or that were announced under the expenditure review exercise back in 2005. And I think we talked a bit about it yesterday, but the initial intention and what was announced in press releases as the department's approach to meeting the ERC reductions was initially to reduce by 24 positions in the Pacific region, fishery officer positions. What's stated here is that 12 of the 24 were eventually returned, but in actual fact, the reductions of 24 were never actually implemented. There was a reversal of that decision early in 2006. So the actual reduction of the 24 positions as planned never occurred. So there wasn't a case of taking 24 and returning 12. The 24 were never actually cut. So that's just a point of clarification there.
All right, thank you. Next, and almost finally, tab 11 in Canada's exhibit book has a document that's a risk profile document from 2009. Mr. Steele and Mr. Nelson, do you recognize that document? Sorry, 2011.
Yes, I do.
And,
Yes.
all right. And I think it's common ground, Mr. Commissioner, but for reasons that I don't know, there's a glitch in the dating of this document in different parts of it. It is a 2011 document, even though it says at different parts of the document that it's 2009. I think they used some template in this company and forgot to update their date or something. With that, Mr. Steele, this is a document that's used by Fisheries and Oceans to develop risk profiles, is it? Or assess risk to the work you do, is it?
Well, this is the end product, basically, of a risk assessment process that we went through with the assistance of the consultants in Terrace.
All right.
To basically identify what are the key risks facing the program at the corporate level, and determining the potential impact of those risks, and then developing mitigation strategies to deal with them.
Okay, and on page 5, there's a colorful matrix that is called a risk heat map. Now, this is similar in appearance to one that Mr. Nelson was asked about yesterday by Mr. Martland. The one that Mr. Nelson was asked about and this one, are they both using the same methodology to get at the end point of putting on the matrix where certain things lie in terms of risk level?
Yes, basically the same methodology. It's a voting exercise and consensus
All right.
as to what the level of risk should be, and the likelihood and impacts.
May this document be the next exhibit, please?
So 713?
Now, Mr. Nelson, you heard a bit from Ms. Bombardier, or some evidence from Ms. Bombardier about sentencing. You're familiar with something called creative sentencing process, are you?
Yes.
And can you just explain in the context of habitat compliance what creative sentencing is used, and maybe give an example?
Well, it's been used for quite a number of years in habitat cases in DFO, and it stems from, I think it's Section 79(2) of the Fisheries Act. Rather than give, and it's more prevalent in larger, well, no, in larger fines, in larger, say, dealing with a larger company. Rather than levy a large fine, there will sometimes be a substantial amount of money put aside for habitat restoration. In other words, to restore the damage that might have been done. And an example, a recent example in Shuswap Lake system, where a marina development had destroyed a bunch of fish habitat. I'm not exactly sure of the number, but it is in the range of $350,000 to $375,000 was put towards a fund to restore the damage, and a much smaller fine was levied against the individual.
All right. Final question then, and Mr. Martland asked each of you this as well, but I offer you the opportunity if you have anything more to say, whether you have any recommendations or suggestions in relation to Fraser Sockeye as it relates to the work of your respective department or unit in habitat compliance, whether you have anything that you think is important to pass on to the Commissioner. And I'll start with you, Mr. Steele, if I may. Anything that you want to add to what you've already said?
Well, I think the only point I'd like to mention is the fact that resourcing issues, departmental resourcing issues, have come up a fair bit so far in the last day and a half. And notwithstanding what I just said about the 24 positions that weren't actually cut in Pacific Region, that I wouldn't want to give the impression that I'm downplaying the fact that the program in this region and nationally does have some significant issues with regard to budgets and resourcing. So I would I would, I wouldn't want to leave the impression that I'm downplaying that, and it is an issue I think that the Commission may want to have a close look at as you continue with your discussions and deliberations. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Steele, do you have suggestions or recommendations, your top 2 or 3 that you might think important to leave with the Commissioner?
Well, I had a list yesterday that I read off. I think
Yep.
those are important, but a point I'm struggling with is this national protocol, and I'm concerned that, Mr. Commissioner, I might be leaving the impression that we're going to leave here and get this together real quickly. I expressed some concerns I have with how we're going to achieve this, and this morning reviewing some of the information that it was based on in our CNP audit, there's some discrepancies that I have to understand before I can move this forward. The roles and responsibilities in here conflict with some of the things that are in our CNP audit. As an example, it states in the CNP audit that CNP will play a security role for Habitat staff, and I only read that this morning, and that's not our mandate. If Habitat staff have an issue with civil disobedience, it's a police matter. So it's a clarification thing, I guess, that I have to have worked out with the department. We will follow this. I am a loyal employee, and I enjoy doing my job, but and I will carry forward as best I can whatever we do. But this, coupled with what I see on the horizon with challenges on salary dollars and so on for operating funds, we have, I consider, one of the most dedicated workforces anywhere with our officers, and just the expectations continue to pile up, and the ability to deliver continues to fall.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Bombardier, last word in terms of my questions. Anything you want to, beyond what you've already said, underline for the Commissioner?
No, nothing to add. I think we've covered
All right.
for Environment Canada. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, I had some more questions about the PPR, but I think in the interest of time, I'll have to leave that, and I'll discuss with Mr. Martland how I might impart that information to him and through him to you, involving the other participants, of course. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. I just bring us a little closer. I just have 2 very quick questions. If Mr. Bissett could bring up exhibits 701 and 702 that were at the beginning of the session this morning. I just wanted to ask Mr. Nelson whether there were any similar, well, I guess it's the graph I'm looking at, Mr. Nelson, whether there's anything similar that has been done for the Fraser watershed. Because I take it this is for the Pacific region.
This is for the Pacific region. I can check. It would be very easy to produce if we don't have one.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. And I just want, just for clarification, Mr. Taylor, because different terms were used, in the documents, CMP is conservation and protection, and the HMP is a habitat management program, but I note there's other language like habitat compliance and compliance management. Do I take it the references to habitat compliance and compliance management would fall under the habitat, the HMP part, not the CMP part?
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you very much.
On your first question, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Nelson has indicated that it would be easy to prepare a chart of this kind for the Fraser watershed, so we'll take that on and get back to Mr. Martland and pass something in to him, and he can then deal with the Participants' Council and through to you.
Thank you very much. Please take the morning break. Please.
Hearing will now recess for 15 minutes.